Okay, recording has started. Welcome to the Cloud Robotics Working Group meeting, 25th of August. It's going to be a bit less energetic this time. I don't know if that's the right term. Basically, we've had a few speakers recently, which has been really great to hear from them. So this week is intended to be more of a relaxed chat about what we've heard, what we've learned. I did make I made a little Google Doc to help guide the discussion. I definitely wrote it all myself with no help from ChatGPT. Everyone nodding. Yeah.
That's a very welcome disclaimer these days.
Yeah.
That's very welcome.
Even if it's a lie.
No.
So I put something. I'll share it because we're recording. No point in me having it on another screen where people can't see. But it's basically what have we learned? What do we think we've learned from the speakers, including current practices, I guess, and then what we want to find out more about. Because I think I'm sure there's room for more speakers that we haven't had in yet, or other topics that we want to research ourselves. For example, I think there's still a big question mark over the automatic anomaly detection stuff, which I thought could be interesting to talk about. So this is here if we want it. If we have a topic of discussion, like autonomous anomaly detection, we can take it away and just talk about whatever.
I think it's good to have a document on so we can sort of jot down some notes. The first reaction when I see this is it looks like we had 3 speakers from technology providers that solve problems. What we don't have is we didn't have anybody from the field who says, well, and these are the actual pain points. Now, of course, we can rely on these speakers to have done their research, and I think they did, to varying degrees, right? Bagel is very new. Sure, it came out of Model Prime, and so they were informed by a lot of these things. But in many ways, it's a technology push, right? It's trying to apply LLMs to the robot data kind of analysis problem. Peaks has a very particular angle. I think from all of these, probably Roboto did the most research on the field. But I guess what I'm saying is, in a nutshell, it would be awesome if we could get a speaker from the field with a relatively big size fleet that could speak to, how does, what are your problems? Are you aware of these technologies? And to what degree do you think your pain points are met or not, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, so you suggest we invite somebody who has large fleets and
that's then getting us to the problem. I think it's relatively hard to get those speakers. In some ways, it's easy to get these technology provider speakers because they look for an audience. I mean, to them, it's PR, right? It's they get to share about their story and their technology, and maybe interested users are in the audience. But for a robotics company maybe then I guess we could just try to turn it on its head, and we could try to get a speaker with the allure that if they speak here, maybe people will come forward with possible solutions. So somebody who has a very like not severe problem, but like would really like some help with a problem, has a problem where they really currently struggle with solving it, maybe they might be motivated to speak as a means to, really just like, I'm just inverting what happened here, right? Like, these are technology providers looking for people who might be interested in the technology. You could do the exact opposite, which is not usually how people think when they present, right? Oftentimes, and I've attended any number, and you probably too, of these talks by CTOs at robotics companies, and when they describe their pain points, they usually also describe the solution, and it kind of goes along with a certain level of pride, right? Like, we have this problem, this is how we solved it, let me sharing notes, kind of sharing best practices, and that's nice, but it doesn't have to be the only motivation to present. It could also be an attempt to engage the community. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not sure whether this will fly.
Yeah.
What you said made me think about a conundrum I'm in right now, because I'm writing, as you know, it's European proposal seasons for academics in Europe, and we're always trying to get use case providers where you have the European project perspective, where there is the research. Then you typically involve a large industrial partner to do the implementation for somebody, so a technology provider, an integrator, a robotic company to do a solution for the third component of a use case provider, which is the end user, the domain expert. And here, somehow, I see the same thing with, if we look at Roboto, and Bagel, they're all providing to robotic companies, right? So they are a middle layer technology that offers technology for robotics, which is offering technology itself to somebody who has a real problem in the real world. So it's somehow it's halfway in the middle of the sandwich, the technology we're talking about here. And I was just wondering about this because you were mentioning problems and these things. The guys from Roboto come from Amazon, so they had the idea while they were working in Amazon Robotics, and Amazon Robotics is a kind of a special beast because they do robotics for a very specific domain, and they own the entire vertical stack. So that's why probably you had the impression that Roboto were the most researched of the guys, because they came from that experience directly. This is what you were mentioning made me think, and I'll shut up now.
I think that's a good analogy, actually. In some ways, you're bringing in yet another party, which is the robotics company's user, the domain expert. So there's like the technology provider, like Roboto AI, they provide to robotics companies. The robotics companies build a service for somebody else. Sometimes they're vertically integrated. Now there's companies that actually offer whatever. There was the example that comes to my mind is Iron Ox. They pivoted, I think, since then, but they were actually selling salad, right? And their salad was grown in a robotic warehouse, as opposed to building robots for warehouse operators, right? So there's these examples, and in some ways those are the most useful to learn from because they've seen the entire stack, they've seen it from all sides. But yeah, and I think in most applications, there's still two different companies: the operator and the robotics company, and then the actual well, we think of it as the actual user, right? But even they, of course, have their own users, right? Even if you're an orchard and you're growing apples, well, guess what? You also have customers, so the chain goes on. But I guess looking one step beyond is a good idea.
I was also thinking about this in terms of, I mean, you might have with your company the same view, right? Because you are also offering technology to robotic technology providers, right? So and I was also wondering how this is perceived, by the way, in funding these companies. When you go to the VCs must see where you sit in the stack.
Yeah. You get different responses. So I don't know whether you know, but I'm not Transitive is not VC funded. We're bootstrapped, and I'm growing more and more convinced that that's actually the right model. We did talk to VCs here and there, and we got different responses. Some of them, of course, especially a few years ago, pointed out that if you are providing services to other startups, then your market itself is at risk because if you let's say you have 10 customers, but half of them go under because, well, startups do go under. That's a real risk. So that is risky. And with robotics still being a somewhat nascent market, that has been a problem. I think it has changed a lot now with that new hype around humanoids and so forth. More people want in, and now there's more of this picks and shovels kind of mentality, right? Like that these technology providers are really here to help the gold miners and famously make more money. At least these types of mentions now show up in like the marketing of Foxglove, for instance, right? Which tells me that, and I tend to think that that Adrian and the people at Foxglove are sort of spearheading a lot of this. They're a fairly well-funded, well-established and so forth company. So I'm assuming when he says that, it's grounded in some reading of the tea leaves in the market. Some other VCs say interesting things about software becoming the differentiator over time, and hence robotics companies potentially not wanting to outsource that. I tend to disagree with that, and the reason for that is because software is not monolithic, right? And my counterexample is Slack. Everybody uses Slack, even though they could build their own chat client, but why on earth would they? And so I think there's definitely aspects like that. Yeah, I don't know whether that was really responsive to what you said, but it just came to my mind.
It did, but I would have a counter argument to what you were saying about Slack, because when you were saying technologies for robotic companies or software for robotic companies tend to become an asset that is strategic, so some companies wouldn't want to delegate it to a third-party company. I mean, Slack is not that. Slack is not the core technology of a company, but for instance, what Transitive does.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to express, right? That yes, software is not monolithic. Half of it may be very secret sauce and an asset and a differentiator, especially now with these foundational models and people training their own and so forth. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's going to be your secret sauce, but that doesn't mean that you need to build everything else. Like there's so much support software around that here. I mean, the things that we talk about here, like logging and observability, right? You don't need to build that yourself. There's so many good tools that you can utilize to build it. And so that's where yeah. But then again, this is also not a view that I hear from a lot of VCs. They definitely distinguish there a lot. And then I think the other point you were mentioning or alluding to was the level of vertical integration. Certainly, some people think that you should integrate more vertically, meaning like, who cares whether it's a robot? Just sell your damn salad, right? Like, no matter how you want to harvest it, because then you're also really honest about, is the robot really the best solution here? Because in the end, you want to sell salads, and if you find out halfway through that, cheap labor is actually better because whatever the properties are, then you as a business owner, as long as you're being objective, will consider using or augmenting the robots with humans and so forth. So definitely some good points to be made. But then again, specialization, acquiring all of that market and industry experience can be tricky.
Yeah, many of the articles I remember about why robotic companies fail are exactly about what you were mentioning right now, that the technology comes before the problem somehow.
Yeah.
And
I think that has been changing, though. I mean, that what you described is exactly how I put it with all of those Willow Garage spinouts. A lot of them were, Willow Garage was shutting down. People wanted to stay in robotics, so they did the right thing. They tried to look for a business model for what they were doing, so it wouldn't have to be philanthropically funded. And that's great, but it was literally, we have a hammer, let's find a nail. And some of them succeeded and others didn't. Whereas like the newer breed of robotics companies, I think they really do start with a problem. Like they pick a domain, they observe the domain, they just look for problems where they know, okay, this is something that robots could potentially do, and then they try to solve that. It's obviously a much more promising approach.
You reminded me of I went to a meetup here in Zurich that was organized by Yves from Roboto, and one of the speakers was from Anybotics, and he was mentioning how much they are a spin-off of ETH, right? So they developed the four-legged robot but they did. They had the hammer, but they did spend a lot of time looking for the nail, and they actually looked at very different nails until they nailed it, until they got a good model.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I mean, in innovation management, like in business and administration, there's a subfield about technology and innovation management, and they do distinguish there between the technology push and the market pull, right? And it's interesting when you study that, because market pull is obvious. A good example for market pull is if you came out with it. The market is currently in the EV market. The market is pulling for cars with larger range, right? Meaning that if you could develop a car with a range that has 2,000 miles or whatever on one charge, it's a no-brainer. Like, the market will rip it out of your hands, right? So there's technology pull, and the difficulty is on the technology side. You can't do it. Nobody knows how to. And those things are easy to sell. But the most disruptive technologies in history were all push-based. They were all something that when people first saw it, they were like, why on earth would you want that? Even TV. Like, apparently the reaction that people had when the TV was shown to them was like, why would I want to look at a black and white picture of the real world in the corner of my room when I can see the real world out of my window in color and 3D? Like, that they couldn't. And of course, now in hindsight, we can tell what the problem was, right? Nobody could imagine all of the content that you could create for it. But that's how it started, right? And it was sort of a push thing. And then later on, internet, the same thing, email, right? Like, people didn't at first really. I mean, we've had internet since 69 or something like that. It took forever to take off. And sure, bandwidth and so forth was a problem, dial-up, but you could do a lot of cool things, but it hadn't percolated before. So, anyways, so I'm not totally negative on these technology push. I'm really, in fact, I'm happy. Humanoids are a great example, right? People are trying to push those damn humanoids into the real world, right? NVCs are pouring money and money and money into it, and all of the technologists, roboticists, look at it and go like, yeah, but that's not how robotics currently works. And it's going to be very interesting to see, because maybe they will find a nail, right? Like, maybe they will and teach us something that we just don't currently pay attention to. And that could be such a breakthrough for the robotics market. Could, right? I'm not necessarily the problem with all of these things is you don't see all of the failed push attempts that didn't make it. But yeah, who knows?
I think the Robotic Olympics in China did show quite a few of the fails of current humanoids, at least.
Yeah. Oh, well, that would almost be a fun topic to have sort of a side discussion on, like what that. It is so interesting for me because China, it's a fantastic PR stunt of China's technology market as such, right? Because they were the first to host such an Olympic, even though, right, I mean, we've had RoboCup for like about 25 years now. A little more, actually, almost 30 now. People weren't necessarily paying so much attention to it. And of course, humanoids catch the eye a lot more, and there's more to see, especially if you call it Olympics, and there's so many different disciplines. But I think they really showed that they have, it's a claim of speed, right? Like, they really pointed out that they have, they claim a seat at the table of the innovation in robotics, and it's something to think about. Like, why is it that the first humanoid robot Olympics happened there, even as goofy as it may have been, right? Sorry, we've been speaking a lot, Mike. Did we derail your?
That's okay. As I said, if we don't follow this, it doesn't matter. Okay. I kind of wanted to go back to. So you said you were kind of speaking out loud about getting someone in to talk that provides robots and has pain points, right? And you were saying, well, maybe they'd maybe providers will contact them to help them if they come and talk to us. I feel like there's got to be other reasons that someone would want to. I mean, even people that are making robots would surely want to talk about them more. Like this is what we're doing, and also these are the pain points we're having in the same conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly, and then usually they follow up by describing their solution, which again, like, is sort of a little bit of a. It comes with some pride, but it's obviously well earned. It also helps. It's also sort of a. How do you say it? It's almost like a motivator for that team, right? Because if you can go back home to your company and say, hey, last week I presented at the so-and-so meetup the work that you guys all did, and people thought it was really cool. that's motivation. So there can be other motivations for people to come. I was just thinking of that. In general, we probably don't have to describe too much the value that they might be getting out of presenting. I mean, or whatever, one sentence might be enough for each of these possible values. Yeah, all I'm saying is that I think it will be a little bit harder to get these people to speak, but I might be wrong.
No, that's very fair. Yeah, I was just thinking about it and then trying to think, well, if we don't think of a specific company that we want to invite, how do we get someone, right? Because probably it's like a LinkedIn post or Ros Discourse or whatever that says, hey, we want to hear about this, come and talk to us. And then at that point, it would be good to have a reason that it would help them.
Yeah, we can definitely try that. I suspect that we may not get a lot of responses. And we may want to qualify in that call for presentations already to say that, if you have a fleet of at least 50 robots, then we want to hear from you, so that we don't get too many. Because we really, those are really the people that we want to hear from. And then if we don't get a lot of responses, which is quite likely just because there aren't even that many companies that have such large fleets, and they may not be paying attention to Rust Discourse, and even if they do, they may not respond, we may have to follow it up. So it may require some direct outreach. And I can definitely provide some names, but that doesn't mean that I know how to get to those people.
Yeah. Maybe if you could provide me some names that I can cold call, I guess. I don't know if it's strictly cold calling because I'm speaking to them specifically, but I'm not sure. Yeah, if you can provide me those, I can try and reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to talk to us.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I can send you a number. I can send you a short list.
Thank you. Yeah, let's see if we can get someone with some pain points.
Yeah, the most likely, what usually happens in these conversations when I have them is that there's two types of pain points. Would be nice pain points, like pain points that you would like to get rid of, but are not really pain points, like they're not required, and those that you really, really need to have done. And then, of course, maybe the company is already out of business, or they have come up with some way to solve that pain point, right? And so that's where often it's interesting to talk to these companies, because you find out about all of the work, so to speak, that they did, like all of the hacky ways that they did solve things. And then usually the reason why they stick with that is because switching to something else is actually quite involved, right? And something else is burning all the time, right? And so they rather attend to the current fires. But maybe we can direct them to talk also about whatever the current fires are, however mundane they are. They may not fit into logging and observability, but maybe for future future discussions that will be useful input.
Another thing that we could try and do is identify a particular topic we want to hear more about. So it's not just people with pain points, but anomaly detection or something else.
I think I was assuming we would ask specifically, about logging and observability, this sort of current topic that we're discussing, and how do you solve it. A lot of times they will then describe their kind of architecture, where they often combine Prometheus with Grafana and some S3 and OpenTelemetry, whatever, right? But it's useful, and then we can also hear like what's the issue with using all of these open source tools that were built for servers, not for robots. Does it work? Does it not work? Yeah.
I think one of the things you have there that needs filling up is you have a bullet for summarizing, I guess, the takeaways, right? Or also I would also use just a phrase to to say the main differences between the three technologies. The way I understood them, Roboto is the power of Roboto is the fact that you have all your bags in the cloud and then you search for things. And then Heeks was more about detecting things as they are happening, or continuously recording, but then finding a pattern. And Bagel was instead talking to your ROS bag. Did I get it right? I mean,
Yeah, that's right. Talking to data after recording, no live interaction, I guess. As far as I know, maybe they're trying to do that.
Yeah, they mentioned they wanted to get in that direction. As a matter of fact, they were using MCP, and I looked at a little bit at the implementation after we had the meeting, and the architecture is fairly simple, and it's MCP with very few tools that allow you to then show your prospect to an LLM basically. And it's the same technology you would use on a. They mentioned in the call that they would like to use it on a real robot to actually do something, not just to a posteriori, not just to see what happened in the past. By the way, that's very similar to what your recent blog post was about, Mike.
I was going to say there was a recent blog post that someone published.
Exactly. There's a recent blog post from you that could be re-implemented with MCP fairly simply, I would say.
Yeah.
I have to apologize. I missed that blog post. Was it on our blog or where was it?
It was on my own blog. I basically ripped off Giovanni's students' work and gave them credit. To be fair, I didn't claim it was mine.
You gave all the credit. It's very nice. Yeah.
Is it the controlling robots using an LLM?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I need to take a look at that.
But I thought it was good that you could just give someone a repo that they spin up a Docker image and then they get to talk to a robot and make it do things. I thought that was valuable.
That's very valuable. And offline, I will ask you how you managed to repackage everything, because there was a lot of technology in that, no?
I didn't need to do much repackaging. I basically followed the instruction. Well, that's not true. Initially, I thought that the base Docker image was broken, so I kind of reconstructed it from scratch, and then realized that what was broken was, in fact, my GPU pass-through, and the original Docker image did work. So that's just me doing much more work than I had to. But
we'll do it offline because it's
yes, sorry, yeah. Where were we? Right, key takeaways. Yeah. All data exists in the cloud. You can search across data, visualize. Even there was something. What would you say? Where they?
What was fantastic is you could search a pattern. You could search a behavior.
That's it. And then, did they have a live agent?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember, though. Maybe I'm wrong.
That we remember. Heeks would detect events as they happen, upload data around the event only.
And they do have an agent, of course, in this case.
Storage costs. Live agent available. Just because of. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I remember that was quite elegant with X. I think they had it was also containerized, and they would download live what the agent needs to search, right? So, although the patterns were simpler than the one in Roboto, they were just event based, but you could say, okay, now I'm looking for this set of events, and the agent would pull it basically and start looking for that. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, I should probably write that. Agent word pull triggers from
Cloud,
yeah, cloud. That's good. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So Bagel, by the way, Aaron said that they had an idea of how to solve, I think, the math operations. You're using the American way of saying maths. I think he wanted to come and talk to us again. I'd have to double check the message. So I said, "Oh yeah, do you want to come next session when we do a tryout?" And he said, "Oh, we need a bit more time." So I think a future session we may have them back, and we'll see how Bagel has grown in that time. Ooh, I wonder if community involvement is particularly Bagel, but Heeks mentioned it a couple of times. So we're really looking for feedback on it. I don't know if that's just an attempt to improve their product or because they struggled to find, user data on what the most useful thing to develop was.
I think with Bagel, they are. I think Arun wrote I even want to say he wrote either a short LinkedIn post on it or a blog post where he was articulating why open source is the way to go. And I think it's sort of a little bit of a mind shift from perhaps I didn't look very carefully how they went about Model Prime and how that is going, but there seems to be a very concerted effort to kind of start almost with community first, like start with the open source, and of course everybody, a real open source project is one where you get community contribution. You're not the only one contributing. And of course, they're also fairly early on. So if their goal is to build a new open source project, then you want to get people involved right away. Heeks, I don't remember exactly what they said around that, but Heeks is also not open source or anything like that, is it?
No, not to my knowledge. So Bagel definitely wanted people involved to build and to guide what it was meant to do. And then Heeks, I think, wanted feedback on the UI and the features available and does this solve your problems kind of questions. And then Roboto, I think they were happy to receive feedback, but they didn't ask for it in the same way the others did. So
Yeah,
that makes me think they have.
I think it reflects more on the maturity. They have, users and customers. I don't know how far along Heeks is. If I had to guess, and I hope I'm not, misrepresenting anything, but my best guess is that they're earlier on in their deployment. They may not have that many real world deployments as Roboto has, and then Bagel is just months old, right? So clearly, they're much more open to feedback.
Yeah. Okay, so Bagel talk to data after recording. I guess AI is a common theme across all of them, which is no surprise, really, given.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, well, Giovanni knows this, and I obviously also come from academia, and AI is in academia. AI has been a term since '57, right, when John McCarthy coined it at that Dartmouth College meeting workshop. And so, yes, in that sense, AI is a topic for all three of them. But the new way to understand AI nowadays, when people talk about AI, they really mean Gen AI, and oftentimes even LLM based, even though they really mean a transformer based model that they may have trained or whatever. On that latter, obviously, Bagel is much more using that, whereas Robot AI is more, I would call it trusted AI, like stuff that we know works and you can somewhat rely on it, but maybe it's not. It doesn't have the same sort of wow effect as LLMs have. And then Heeks, I didn't pick up on that actually. Do they do some sort of automatic pattern recognition, or was it more a feature for a convenience feature for people to specify trigger conditions?
The
I
latter.
didn't quite.
Yeah, it is more about the triggers and the data that you want to capture. And then Bagel, their entire service is AI.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I mean, there's a big cottage industry right now of people who take the tool. I mean, talking about hammer and nail, right? They take LLMs and they throw it at whatever and see whether it fits, right? And so obviously in every industry that's going on right now, and in robotics, people are taking LLMs and throwing it at robot control, robot data analysis, this and that, and that's how I think about this particular project.
Yeah, Bagel entire service is AI in the sense of what Chris was saying before. It's really an LLM in reality. So that, and I remember that was also, since I'm looking into MCP lately quite a lot, that was also elegant, also that approach, because it was also Dockerized. You would grant to the container only access to a certain directory or amount of your file system where the bags are, and so and then start an MCP server on your own robot or wherever you have the ROS bag that would interact with the LLM. So all these NCP implementations work the same way, right? You expose tools basically, or functions that an LLM can invoke to then do something that you ask through natural language, basically. So that's very similar again to a blog post that somebody posted recently.
Are there any key differences that we would say from the speakers?
I think you captured the differences there in those sub bullets, right? That was. It's just that they have different focuses. I guess that's why they're different by design. They're trying to solve slightly different problems.
Exactly, they have different targets. I would say the Roboto is really for robotic developers, extremely technical developers that are trying to find a specific pattern of behavior that they want to try to fix. X similarly, but maybe a bit less sophisticated. Bagel is more really about having a natural language interface to get data out of a ROS bag.
So Bagel's not really for developers specifically, is it? The idea is you're making it easy to see what's in a ROS bag for anyone.
Yeah, exactly. It could be, I think it's one of the things they also mentioned, or maybe we mentioned it, could also be used by customer support as a first tool to somehow understand what's going on with the robot.
That's an interesting way of putting it, right? Because when you deploy a large fleet, you will actually build up levels of support, right? When you have 5 robots in the field, there's only one level of support, and that's your engineers. And soon enough, your engineers are annoyed by just supporting the robots in the field. They don't have time to do engineering work anymore. So you either consciously or subconsciously, people of your team become more ops focused and others more engineering focused, and then eventually you'll probably start hiring ops people and they become less and less technical, right? Because it's easier to hire less technical folks, and you don't necessarily want to have robotics engineers do the support work. Alongside that development, you tend to develop more software to support less and less technical people. And so you build this this pyramid really of people and their skill level. Engineers sort of at the bottom can do everything, including change the code, right? Then on top of that, maybe you have in-house field ops. Then once you get to like 20 robots or so, people tend to hire like 24 hours call centers that are trained to help customers with like basic things, and they have some permissions, right? So a famous thing is they can relocalize a robot if it's mislocalized, or send some sort of reset command, but it's very limited. And then the front is always the end user themselves, right? You provide them with some dashboard where they can see what the robots are doing. Maybe they can send them on missions. Maybe they can do some very, very basic debugging, such as, are there any errors, or reset the robot or something like that. These LLM tools, I think, are actually, and Bagel in particular, can be extremely interesting, is sort of in the middle to the top, right? Where you want to almost codify what the user is able to do, so that you can do that through these MCP tools. And some users may be able to use certain tools and others don't. But you don't have to explain much to them, right? Because it's English. So it's really an interface tool, rather than teaching them how to use your dashboard and these things. And that might allow you to. This could be very impactful for RaaS businesses, right? Because you always have to bring down the cost per robot for operations. And of course, the more of the field ops you can push to your customers, the more you can enable your users to help themselves, the less you have to do all of that. And so if you can use this tool to let them do more, that could be quite powerful, right? The example with the relocalization, right? So this is sort of the thing that typically this 24-hour call center does, or the first level support inside the company. It requires you to understand what it even means for a robot to be mislocalized. Usually, we have a tool like that, right? You show the laser scan of the robot, you overlay it on the map, and you see, well, where the laser scan dots hit is not the same where the walls are, so I need to rotate it a little bit and shift it, and it's sort of a manual operation. If instead a user could say, well, the robot is, I guess they won't know it's mislocalized, but they might say something like, well, it's sort of going the wrong way. Like it turned left when it should really have turned right, or somehow it can't find its way. That might be sufficient to translate into the problem, and then apply a solution. And then I guess that's interesting, right? Because these LLMs, they can also be a dialogue, right? So if then the robot sort of says back, or the system says back, well, where is the robot, right? Like if it knows that there's a potential that a possible explanation is that it's mislocalized, it could ask the user, well, where is it? And at least in English terms, or language terms, they might be able to describe it, and that might help the robot to realize. That's kind of a fun thing to think through. I don't know, Giovanni, whether you've come across that, but the kidnapped robot problem is such a well-studied problem.
Very famous, yes.
Yeah, it's very famous, and now just sort of asking whether the specificity of an English statement, such as whatever, you're near the exit, is that sufficient to reinitialize the sample,
have you been kidnapped? No, I'm joking. But it's interesting that you talked about the possibility that MCP offers with LLMs together, especially for end users or first layer customer support, because disclosure, I'm writing a proposal with a Swiss company about that, exactly, a RaaS company. So that's one of the things we're promising to do.
It kind of brings me back to a thought I had earlier but didn't mention, which is AI being a common theme. It could be that that's the hot technology and everyone is looking for a nail to hit with it. Or it could be that previously we didn't have the tech, so we didn't have a good way to solve those problems, and now we do, so we should start solving them with LLMs, etc. Which is it? I'd argue that querying your data in natural language and telling the robot, hey, you're actually near the fire exit, as a non-technical user, those are things that weren't possible before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, hammer and nail it doesn't mean that you need to invent the nail, right? Sometimes you just look around nails from the past, right? I mean, you can even go very literal with that analogy and look at your workshop and look at nails that your previous hammer wasn't able to hit, or nail, but now you can try again, right? It's quite possibly a cyclic relationship, right? Where you
but there's I think there's a lot of aspects. So as we saw, so before generative AI, now we have image recognition, object recognition, pose estimation. Those are all things that are working quite well now, and they're before generative AI. So you can already use that to help a robot find things and interact with physical things. Let's put it this way. And then come the LLMs, or even better, the VLMs, where you can talk to the brain, a new brain of the robot, have a user that is non-technical express what the robot should do, and even maybe point in some direction. There's a very nice paper from 1.5 years ago, I think it is, called Bumble. And I really liked it because somehow they put together a few of these things. So they had some neural networks that they were using for annotating images. I think it was before segment anything. I think they were using object detection simply and putting bounding boxes around things. But then they would feed this to the annotated image to a VLM. So that then the VLM, when you are talking about an object, already knows what you're talking about and can ground it in reality. So can find the position of an object that you're talking about in reality. And you can bring this further. I mean, you can think about having a user interface now where users are annotating. Look, when you're trying to open the door, this is the handle that actually you should try to twist, because the other one won't make it. So you can build on top of these things, and I think we are. I'm having discussion with some of the colleagues already here at the university, but I think you can already build a lot of cool things with that without going to the VLAs, without going to the visual language action models, because basically you already have a way for a human to be much more specific in what a robot should do, and then you can build this on top of the old robotic engineering, good old-fashioned engineering, as Ken Goldberg would say. So I think the technologies, there's a lot of things that were not possible before, and some from traditional AI, and now from transformers and from LLMs and VLMs.
Quick technical question to you. I know obviously about LLMs. I've also read a little bit about VLMs and VLAs, but I wasn't sure. Did these VLMs and VLAs get the same sort of boost from transformers as LLMs did, or do transformers not apply there?
I have no clue, Chris. It's beyond my understanding. I'm a user of models. I never coded one, and I even have trouble understanding, for instance, some LLMs are based on diffusion rather than transformers, and I don't even know that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, then same. It's on my to-do list to sort of spend a little bit more time with the literature there, but it feels like this train is moving so fast. Every time I revisit my to-do list, it's already outdated.
Same for me. I will have a break from teaching next August, so in 1 year from now, and on my to-do list is definitely understand these things better.
To-do list 1: learn AI. All of it. Okay. I think we've got some useful stuff that could be put into a guide eventually. So we could talk about current practices. How do we currently do logging observability? My observation from our speakers is that people are still recording everything and keeping it somewhere. So Heeks wants people to watch for events and just upload a bit of data, and I think that could work eventually, but people don't trust it yet because it's too new. Maybe they do. I'm just talking large scale, I guess. So that's
Didn't we have a session where we broke down the logging and observability problem a little bit into the sub-problems, and one of them was the decision what to record and what not to record, and what to keep and what not to keep, and when to upload and not upload, or did I dream that?
So we've got a document that talks about what kind of data is important for different applications, that kind of thing. So we did have that session, yeah. And that, I think, is relevant, because even then we were saying, well, there's lots of data. You don't need to record everything necessarily. You can if you want. But it seems like the evidence now, at least from the companies that we've heard from, is that people will record everything.
Yeah, we did discuss that, and we did discuss that there was no solution for automated anomaly detection, right? And even talking to these companies that are somehow trying to do something similar or something related to this, they also didn't have a solution for that. I guess our theoretical solution that we bounced upon each other was the fact of saying, we record the system while it's in nominal state, while it's working, and then anything that, but it's easier said than done, of course.
I remember that exchange. Yes, I thought that was it's nice when we don't just observe the field, but make our own speculative contributions. But I thought that was a really neat idea. I hadn't heard that before, and I think you were the one to initially articulate it in this group, and I think it's a really neat idea. One thing that we could do, I'm always thinking in terms of artifacts or outputs from this group. You mentioned guides. Oftentimes, some sort of table works really well. And one thing that I keep finding myself in when I do technology reviews is I create a table where the columns are the problems and then the rows are the solutions, and then I sort of score them, right? I mean, not rocket science, but it's a sort of a useful layout, or you can switch columns and rows, of course, if you prefer. But something we might, I don't know whether you feel like we're ready for it, but because we did that session where we sort of enumerated the problems that we thought ought to be solved, and for some of them, we may have heard validation from others. In other cases, it's just our sort of own sort of LLM up here that has, assimilated that, has absorbed that at one point. We could do that, right? We could list the columns as we see them, and then we could start by scoring these technologies. One thing that I want to be a little bit cognizant of is that I don't know how you guys feel about products, right? Because we don't want to be perceived as sort of what's the right analogy, like New York Times Wirecutter, or like a Consumer Report, right? Like we are not claiming to be an authority that says which products are good or bad. I personally, obviously, have mixed feelings, because then either I throw transitive in or not, and if I do, then I shouldn't be part of the team. But if I'm not, then it's not represented. So for me, it's particularly a little awkward. Yeah, I don't know how to solve it. But if we do mention technologies, then we might as well use something like that to delineate their differences. Another analogy is on Wikipedia, they do that a lot, right? Like when they have tables, like lists of a good one that I often go to is cloud backup solutions. Things like Dropbox and Box and Mega and iCloud and stuff like that, and then they compare them by their features. I think it's a very concise way to provide a lot of overview over a subfield of the industry.
Very nice idea. I use LLMs for that now.
Yeah, I trust tables.
Yeah, I knew you would say that.
Generate tables with LLMs. Done.
No.
So as far as being ready to write the guide, I don't know if we are. I think we're in a state where we could try and put something together and see where the holes are. Part of this session was to kind of think about that a bit. I think we're getting very close to time, so we can't really discuss that. But in the near future, I also don't want to be on this forever. I think it'd be interesting to get more speakers to look at the pain points, try and put something together to find the holes, and give it to some of the speakers and say, do you agree? So that we're not the ones being the sole experts. But this is the number one requested community guide. There are others that I would like to get to at some point. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling going forwards. In the not too distant future, we should be trying to get this out and move on to the next thing.
We could do an intermediate post and say, like, look, whatever, a few months ago, we polled the community. This was the top one. We took it on. This is what we've done. We've had these speakers. Here's our sort of intermediate summary. Do you feel like we're going in the right direction with this analysis? If not, tell us what's wrong with it and how you want to help. The person who responds, either through speaking or proposing specific problems to investigate or so forth. I hear you with moving on, but it might be useful to get one more piece of input from the community before we sort of close this topic. Also, just as a means of, I mentioned the chicken and egg problem. Maybe that was before you joined, Giovanni, but in some ways we're building a stage, right, where we want to have good speakers, so we get a good audience, so we get a good audience, so we get better speakers, and it becomes really a community thing. So thinking in these little steps and pivoting a little bit between providing and soliciting might be helpful if we have enough. But I mean, like, I see what you've been typing here, Mike, and I think it's already a pretty good intermediate summary.
Sounds good. Before we immediately get kicked out, thanks for joining. I'm not sure yet what we'll be doing next session. It might be continuing the summary. Maybe I'll do some work in between, or maybe it'll be a bagel tryout if they're ready. We'll talk offline about it. Thanks for joining and for the discussion. See you then.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.